Hey everyone, how you doing this morning? My name is Richard Taylor, in case you didn't know, and we are going to be discussing we're going to catch up on the latest Final Cut Pro news as it is. There's not much out there, but we're going to be discussing that this morning on Final Cut TV and coffee. We are indeed. Let me just check on a couple of things here. Oh, let's do this. Oh, there we go. That's not going to work. Oh, there we go. Here we go. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I get a kick out of these groups that have, like, there was people talking about coverage at NAB, and they had like dozens and dozens of people. And it's like, you don't need that many people. This is 2023. You just need a couple of people. You don't need dozens and dozens of people. So, good on you if you had that many. I didn't need it. I was there by myself just doing streaming and stuff. So we have our first comment. Good morning, Alista. Here we go. Where are you from? I think I remember you're from somewhere out of the United States. Another good morning from Los Angeles. Glad you could make it in this morning. And so NAB came and went. Everybody was there. Jamaica. There you go, Jamaica. I knew you were from out of the United States. So everybody, all the majors were at NAB. You had Avid was there, Premiere was there, Blackmagic, of course, had an expansive presence at NAB, very expansive. And they had a gigantic update to their software at 18.5 beta. Final Cut Pro team, they released the betas to the public. They have two versions, the regular version, and then they have the studio version. I got the studio version. Good morning from the stormy space coast of Florida. Eric, I hope you're safe. I saw there was going to be a storm down there. That's one of the reasons I wouldn't go to Florida, is because of the hurricane. It seems like, anyway, I mean, maybe it's not quite that bad, but it seems like there are. And so we at NAB, I covered it live. There's companies that had dozens and dozens. Oh, we got to have dozens and dozens of people on the ground and covering this little nuance and this little nuance. Baloney. This is 2023. Need a couple of people and a couple of cameras. You know, all that confusion, everybody running and tripping over each other, and they can't get out the first day and the second day, and they're all stumbling. You don't need all that nonsense. You don't need it all. It's very easy to cover stuff like that nowadays with just a couple of people. Couple of people, half a dozen. You don't need dozens. Half a dozen's plenty. Half a dozen is plenty. But anyway, we covered NAB. We had a really good time. I'm already planning next year's NAB at this point. I'm already planning next year's. What I'm planning on doing is getting there a day early. Instead of getting there Sunday morning, I'm planning on getting there Saturday afternoon, staying overnight Saturday. That way, Sunday morning, I'm ready to go. Because the airline doesn't cost anymore. The airline is still 2 days. I mean, 1 day to and 1 day from. Good morning from a cold and damp spring morning in New Jersey. Yeah, it's cold and damp here on the East Coast. It absolutely is. It's definitely cold and damp here. It's not cold. It's 57. It's not bad. Hi from Atlanta, Ronald, and Tony Oddjob sets good plan. Give yourself more time. Yeah, so what happens is I get to NAB and I have to hit the ground running right on Sunday morning. I get in, airplane comes and lands at 8:30, and NAB opens up at 10 o'clock. So I got to get to the hotel, drop off my bags, and then instead I'm going to get there Saturday afternoon, check into the hotel, relax, and be ready to go Sunday morning without the additional stress of traveling, airplane traveling. So we'll see how that goes. So we have a couple of videos. I tried out some stuff with Blackmagic today. Let me just see what I've got here. I don't even know if this is live. Oh, yeah, it is. Look at that. There's the cat room. There is the cat room. I will be right with you. You're live on TV right now, so be careful. You can watch the cats just for a second. I had to catch something real quick before I published. There we go. Now I'm back. I had to catch something real quick. I saw that I had to change. So Tony says that's a good start. Give yourself more time. So normally I get to NAB Sunday morning. The airplane arrives at 8:30. NAB starts at 10 o'clock. So I get to the airport at 8:30, get through the airport, get an Uber or something, and I get back to my hotel about 9, drop off my bags, and I get to NAB right when it starts. But it's a lot of rushing and coordinating and making sure everything's working. I had a problem this time getting back to the airport with Uber. I had 3 cancellations in a row, and I'm not sure if it was traffic problems or whatever, but I ended up taking a cab because 3 cancellations, and then they tried to charge me for it. They tried to charge me a basic fee. I didn't cancel. I was waiting where I said I was going to be. Either they were going to the wrong place, and I tried calling them. They didn't answer the phone, so I couldn't coordinate. Hey, I'm over here. Where are you? They wouldn't answer the phone, so I had to cancel Uber. First time I've had that issue, and I walked up to get a cab, and I got a cab. Cab wasn't that much more expensive. The cab was like $28. Uber was like 18 to 20, so it wasn't that much more expensive. So anyway, this time, listen, I had such a good time this time. I had a good time in 2022. I had a good time in 2023, and I'm already planning 2024. It's the same time period next year in April, but I'm going to get there Saturday afternoon and relax overnight Saturday and then get to the ground running on Sunday, but I'll be relaxed, slept, not worried about airplane traffic, because that adds a layer of stress, so I'm not going to do that next year. That's my plan. Spend an extra day in LA on Saturday. It's actually, I think the convention center's open Saturday. I'm not even sure. They have some things going on. So no Final Cut Summit. That's a good question, Big Bot Studios. You get you win over. So here's the deal. I certainly expect a Final Cut Pro Creative Summit in Cupertino. I'm not saying that I know there's going to be one. I'm saying I expect one. I don't think that the worldwide global summit they had last year was the kind of numbers that they needed to continue that. So I think they're going to go back, hopefully going to go back to the Creative Summit, one event, Cupertino, one infinite loop, or the spaceship campus where we get to see the Final Cut Pro team. They do a presentation. We get a private meeting with them. People from around the world convene on one location for like a week or 4 or 5 days. There's plenty of training all day long, but you get to meet Final Cut Pro personalities in person, have bagels, coffee, et cetera, et cetera. I'm expecting that to return this year, as long as things are stable in the world. Obviously, things could happen that could circumvent that. They typically don't announce those plans until June or July, sometimes August. I have an inside track on that. Obviously, I'm a media sponsor, media with Future Media Concepts. I deal with them for years, so I do expect a Final Cut Pro Creative Summit, but that's not an announcement that there is going to be one. That's not what I'm saying. Anyway, so to answer your question, no Final Cut Summit. I think there will be a summit, Creative Summit, not like they did last year, but a Creative Summit. So as far as Resolve goes, I switched over to Resolve after using Final Cut Pro since it came out in 2011 and Final Cut Studio before that. So tell me why. Tell me why you did that. At this point, there's no compelling reason to stay with Final Cut. I do not disagree with that statement at all. I do not disagree with that at all. And I'm going to be using Resolve more and more. I switched to Resolve also after being a long-time Final Cut Pro user and a huge fan of the Creative Summit. We said, how did you find the transition from Final Cut and to Resolve? Did you find any products that NAB designed for live and portable live stream? There are some hardware products and some software products. There absolutely were. Up in the BEA area, when I was talking to the people up there, they had some products. It's a bit of a task. Nodes can be a lot to wrap your head around, but it's worth it overall. Much deeper feature set. Yes. So one of the things that people say about Final Cut about Resolve is it's too complicated. Okay. I don't mind complicated software. I like complicated software. Resolve is very complicated. Okay. It's very complicated. I wish we had more access to more features inside of Final Cut, things that we don't have access to now. I like the complexity, for example, of the motion keyframe editor. I like that. I wish that would be available in Final Cut. It's not. We got a very simplistic, frustratingly keyframe controls in Final Cut. It's like doing an Etch-a-Sketch, if you know what that is. They shouldn't judge attendance last year. COVID still having an significant impact on travel. Yeah, but the problem was they divided it into 10. They put the Creative Summit out to 10 different locations, so that divides the attendance in 10. People come from around the world, they converge on the Creative Summit in one location for 1 week. Instead, they divided it into 10 locations, and each location only had a few dozen people show up. I didn't go to any of them. I didn't go to a single one because I don't go for training. I go to spend time with people that I like in the Final Cut community and, have bagels and lunch and stuff, and I get to report from behind the scenes. So as far as that goes, last year's NAB at 54,000 people. I was there last year. It was very, very nice. This year increased by 30%. It's up to 65,000 people. All that's coming back. What they did last year is not because of COVID. It's not because of COVID, because they were still in person. People were still traveling to the different locations. So they were still traveling. So that's not the issue. COVID was not the issue. I mean, small issue, but it wasn't. This year I went to NAB, went there, 65,000 people. I think I shook hands with most of them. And I came back fine, not even sniffles. There's a learning curve, but it's not hard. There are a lot of resources available, especially from Blackmagic. Blackmagic, hands down, has the best online training for their products, the best. And it's not only the best, it's all free. So are we all switching to Resolve now? So this is the question. When people talk about leaving Final Cut, Resolve is the number one NLE they talk about. It's so nice to have properly functioning keyframes. There you go. Here you go. Jeremy Johnson is the winner. I started to switch, but I think I'll use both Final Cut and Resolve. Exactly what I'm doing. I'm using both of the softwares. I went to do a short video this morning, and I couldn't figure out how to do it in Resolve. I started in Resolve, and I couldn't figure out how to do it. So I went back to Final Cut Pro, which I'm very comfortable with. I have my plugins, and et cetera, et cetera. So here's another one. Eric Emmerich says, I shoot on red, cut in Final Cut Pro, and finish in Resolve. All good. There you go. So Tony says, working keyframes would be the reason for me. Well, Tony, are you familiar with Motion's keyframe editor? It's very, very complex. It's also very, very good. Oh, here you go. I've also started using Resolve for iPad OS while on set. It's so handy. Never really found LumaFusion that compelling. Well, LumaFusion is a fantastic NLE. It's very, very complex. It's complex. It's very sophisticated. Let's say that. So there's no reason not to use both. I have it's $29 investment. They've never charged any further than that for LumaFusion. They've had some add-on packages. Export to Final Cut Pro, I think, is $19. One-time fee. That's it. No subscription. And they just added a multicam app, which is also $19. They did a very poor job of advertising and promoting last year's summit. I hope they will try again. Well, look at the word summit. When you go to 10 different places, it's not a summit. Okay, a summit is a single location at a single time. So it's not a summit. That's one of the issues that I had with it. Don't call it a summit. Call it whatever you want, but it's not a summit. A summit is one location at one time, not 10 locations in 10 different times. And they only did the United States. They ended up not doing the European version because I guess since they're based in New York, the European version's a lot more expensive to get people over to Europe, et cetera, trainers, and even they hire locally and stuff. So I don't expect that. Anyway, the European version didn't happen. Those 5 dates are all TBD, to be determined, but I think they're not going to happen. I think they're just going to move on to the Creative Summit. A lot of that has to do with Apple. They have to coordinate with Apple for that. The simplicity of being able to switch into color grading and VFX audio at the click of a button is really liberating fun. Yeah, absolutely. It's been one of the compelling reasons for making the switch for me. I listen. Anybody that wants to switch to Resolve, that's great, but you don't have to switch. You can still use Final Cut for some things. And so here's the deal. My expectations for Final Cut are very low because of the last, say, 3 to 4 years. They've been disappointing with updates. So my expectation for Final Cut is very low. So if they don't do much, they're going to meet my expectations. Now, I'd rather have them push my expectations up with a fantastic update, whether it's 10.7 or whether it's Final Cut Pro 11, with great new features. I would rather them do this, but if they don't do that, it's going to stay down here. My expectations are down here. DaVinci Resolve, my expectations are up here because of what DaVinci Resolve has been doing for the last 3 or 4 years. Update after update after update, feature added, feature added, feature added. I'm going to play a demo of my of DaVinci Resolve 18.5 here shortly. One of the new features that it has, one of the standout features that it has, I worked on it this morning. So DaVinci Resolve color grading features, new update to Final Cut Pro. Well, I think Final Cut Pro's got to do something. Wasn't a summit, it was a roadshow. Exactly. A summit is one event at one time at one location. A roadshow is 10 different locations and you divide up your audience. The summit typically had 200 people, maybe a little bit more than that. Most of those were people that were paying for the training. Now, what I expect this year is, once again, this is nothing from FMC. This is me speculating. I expect a Creative Summit back in Cupertino for a 3 or 4 day event at the Juniper Hotel with all-day training, with events, with, parties and stuff like we always have, dinners. But I expect there to be a virtual element. Instead of just selling the package after the fact for people that wanted to buy it, I expect there to be a live virtual element for people who can't make it. They can still attend the training. And of course, if I go, which I plan on going, I will be streaming live behind the scenes like I always do, like I did for NAB. I don't need 4 dozen, 5 dozen people to do it. Okay, that's not the way it works in 2023. That's overly complicated, and that's old-fashioned way of doing things. You don't need that many people to do a live broadcast. Scott says, I went to last year's summit. I also went in 2019. Last year's was really a different beast entirely. It was clearly aimed at new first-time users. Previous summits were experienced users. Yes. So previous summits were not for beginners. They were for intermediate and advanced users. But it's not just the training, because I don't go to the West Coast for the training. I am a trainer. I'm a Final Cut Pro, Apple certified trainer for Final Cut Pro. I don't go for the training. I go to meet friends that I've known in the Final Cut Pro community, have dinner and lunch, and to report what's going on there for everybody that can't make it. We are using Final Cut Pro from the beginning, but if there are no major updates, not only the razor icon, that's a very funny comment, we'll switch to DaVinci Resolve. That is what I'm going to switch. I'm not going to switch. I am going to add DaVinci Resolve to my arsenal. I really, really like it. And I'm going to show you one of the features. I wish the Juniper Hotel had a pool. Yeah, I'm not, I'm a Pisces, but I don't like the water that much, so the pool doesn't bother me. But I understand. I wonder if Creative Summit that had DVR Final Cut Pro Premiere tracks focused on creative would work and make Apple hardware the common link. I don't think Apple would agree to that. And Apple's schedule is a big, big part of the Creative Summit if they have it. Apple would not agree to a DaVinci Resolve and Premiere. So, we talk to the Final Cut Pro team when we go to Creative Summit in Cupertino. We don't talk to the Apple hardware team. We talk to the Final Cut Pro team. So the Creative Summit is Final Cut Pro, Motion. I don't know if there's ever been any Logic training. I don't think so. But Final Cut Pro and Motion primarily. There are some other things that they do, but they're not other software dependent. Now, if they had a class like, editing in Final Cut and then going to DaVinci for color grading or for special effects, that might fly. But as a matter of fact, in 2019, Blackmagic was one of the sponsors. Blackmagic was one of the sponsors of the Final Cut Pro Creative Summit in 2019. So that's interesting, but I think mostly it was Blackmagic hardware stuff. They had a booth, and I talked to the Blackmagic woman there. And I'll stop by again if they have another one. So that's an interesting point. I don't think it would be Premiere because Apple likes to control things. They like to control events they're on. What I like to see Apple do is help with the cost of some of these things that they put on. So Apple had zero presence at NAB. They're the only major NLE that wasn't even mentioned anywhere. Nobody had any events. We tried to have a few meetups. We had a few, but there was nothing there. Final Cut was not there. Apple was not there. I was there trying to cover. I covered Audio Design Desk. Let me pull this up real quick. Audio Design Desk. That's not what I want. Sponsors. Audio Design Desk, Digital Anarchy, LumaFusion, and CoreMelt, all of who were sponsors that sponsored me going to NAB, and I appreciate each and every one of them. And they all have Final Cut Pro components to them. Every one of those. As a matter of fact, Audio Design Desk was demonstrated running in Final Cut Pro. I know some people on the Final Cut Pro team, and they haven't really indicated there are any major features or advancements coming up. Seems like they are in some sort of maintenance mode. That's interesting. That's very interesting, but they've been in maintenance mode for years, for 3 years, 4 years. So if they, listen, if Final Cut, once again, if Final Cut stays, if they meet my expectations where they're very low, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine for them, I mean. It's not fine for us. If they meet my low expectations, I will just spend more time with DaVinci Resolve and LumaFusion. I like both of those, DaVinci Resolve and LumaFusion. I'll spend more time with those in the next year because DaVinci Resolve is exciting to me. So is LumaFusion. They both have new features constantly coming out, and they're both exciting NLEs. Final Cut Pro, as good as it once was, is not exciting at this point. It's not exciting. So if that's true, it says you know some people on the Final Cut Pro team, and they haven't indicated there are any major features or advancements coming up. If that's true, I'll be spending more time with DaVinci Resolve. I don't have to quit Final Cut in order to use Resolve. I don't have to. I've been using them both. So, and I will continue to use them both. Maybe winding down the entire product line completely. I'd be very, very, very surprised and disappointed. I would be shocked if that was the case, if they were winding down the Pro apps. First off, it would be utter nonsense. I don't think they are. I think that was something they're not going to do. But anyway, I'd be shocked and disappointed if that was the case. But we have other great NLEs. I mean, you can do the free version of DaVinci Resolve if you want to try it out. The free version is very, very cool. Now, what I'm going to show you this morning that I did in DaVinci this morning is not available in the free version. So that's, people have been saying, look, here's the two things that make sense. Number one is what you said. Well, here's three things. Number one is they're going to stop developing Final Cut Pro. I don't believe that. Number two is they're going to maintain the same glacial pace of development they've had for the last 3 to 4 years. I would be disappointed if that's the case. But it would meet my current expectations of Final Cut, which are very, very low. Number three is they have a major version of Final Cut Pro, a complete rewrite from the ground up. I mean, Final Cut Pro code base is 11 or 12 years old at this point. So they could rewrite Final Cut Pro from the ground up with modern foundations, write it on Metal 2 and Swift, whatever the heck that stuff is. Brand new version. And that's why they haven't paid that much attention to Final Cut Pro 10, because this new version is using all the resources. So one of those three things are happening, and I hope it's the brand new, written from the ground up, new version of Final Cut Pro. That's what I hope. Luke says we are not considering using the DaVinci Resolve yet. Final Cut Pro is so fast and efficient that I'm not sure our team will be fast in the long run. When it comes to colors, if you know what you're doing, Final Cut tools are fine. Yeah, they're fine, but they just haven't advanced, have they? I mean, it's like it's been stagnant for like 3 to 4 years. And prior to that, I hate to say this, but I'll say it again, in the Steve Bays era, when he was on the Final Cut Pro team, we had a lot more feature updates and not this stagnation, this glacial pace of development. So first off, I really like DaVinci Resolve and I like LumaFusion both. They would be my next tier of NLEs that I would be using. But I don't have to quit Final Cut in order to use them. I can continue using Final Cut for when I feel like using it, and I can continue using, then I can learn DaVinci Resolve and learn LumaFusion a little better. Look, I was editing, when I was at the NAB, I was editing videos on my iPhone with DaVinci Resolve. It's incredibly powerful, and they have done an incredible job making editing on an iPhone incredibly easy. So I've been using this for mobile editing a lot. I was shooting clips because I shoot clips on my phone, and what I have to do is airdrop them or use a lightning port to get them to my laptop. That's a pain point at this point. It's horrible getting large files off the iPhone onto the laptop. It's horrible. So instead, I left them on my phone, edited them in LumaFusion, and exported from there. And it worked very, very well. Now, I still have to stream when I do live streams from my MacBook Pro like I'm doing now, but I can edit on the phone with LumaFusion. It's fantastic, fantastic app. And listen, I'm not excited about the state of Final Cut Pro. I'm still going to use it. I have too many years not to. And I'm looking forward to a brand new version coming that raises my expectations up back where they belong. Right now, they're down low. But DaVinci Resolve is exciting. And I hate to say it, but Adobe was exciting at NAB because they had the new text-based editing. It was an exciting feature. I even stopped at the Avid booth and watched some of their demonstrations. But anyway, you don't have to quit one in order to use the other. You can use both. Seems amazing that Apple can act so uninterested in software that has millions of seats. I would say 4 to 5 million at this point. 4 to 5 million. Billions of dollars that they've spent on software. The immense amount of plugins for Final Cut Pro is what kept me on the fence about switching to Resolve. More and more plugins are available, especially for motion VFX. I agree with that. That's why I say you don't have to quit Final Cut. If I need a plugin in Final Cut, I'll do something in Final Cut and then shoot it over. I agree with that. That has always been the case. Now, we have this comment again. Apple has always said it's a hardware company. Maybe they just don't want to spend the resources on Pro apps anymore. Well, Jeremy, let's listen. Let's look at that. You can't run the Pro apps without hardware, without Apple hardware. So when you sell a version of Final Cut Pro for $300, they have to have Apple hardware. So the software also supports hardware. Especially as new features come up, you need a more modern machine. You'll update your machine. The other issue is this. Let's conservatively say they announced 2.5 million seats of Final Cut Pro in 2018. 2.5 million. 2017, it was 2 million. It went up 500,000 seats in 1 year, 2017 to 2018. That was 5 years ago. That was 5 years ago. Conservatively, there's probably 4 million seats of Final Cut, if not 5 million. Let's say 5 million because the math is easier. Okay? 5 million seats of Final Cut Pro at $300, $299 per seat is 1.5 billion with a B, 1.5 billion of generated cash just from the software. Just from the software. 1.5 billion. Also, new hardware. People that work in Final Cut buy new hardware. I've got a new MacBook Pro that I use for Final Cut Pro. That's the main reason when I spec this thing out, when I get a new piece of Apple hardware, it's because of Final Cut Pro. Final Cut Pro absolutely sells Mac hardware, so it does both, right? It does both. So the immense amount of plugins for Final Cut Pro kept them on a fence. I agree with that. I absolutely agree, which is one of the reasons I don't want to do Final Cut on the iPad. I've had some issues importing XMLs from Final Cut Pro into Resolve. Anybody else have trouble? What are the best practices? That's a good question. That's a very good question. I will be experimenting with that going forward, and I'll report back. Richard, did you use Premiere at all for your feature-length motion picture that just came out? It's premiering tonight, actually. And no, I did not, because I started it 5 years ago. Once I started it, I kept on it. But I really like Resolve. Let me say that again. I really like Resolve. Resolve is much more exciting than Final Cut at this point. I'm not saying it's better. It's better in some ways and not as, it's, you know, Final Cut still has its benefits. I mean, the magnetic timeline is fantastic. Every time I go to grab a clip and everything's attached to it, and I said, I don't have to worry about sync issues. I can grab this clip, the titles are attached, the sound's attached, and I move that around and I move it one place, and I don't have to worry about sync issues. That's a major benefit of Final Cut Pro. Now, if Resolve gets that, that's going to be a problem for Final Cut Pro. But here's the thing. I go to NAB, all these exciting new updates to Resolve 18.5 beta, Adobe Premiere. I'm not sure what Avid did. It had some kind of maybe an update, I don't know. And other features, other NLEs and plugins that are all updated, and zero from Apple. No presence. They couldn't have a dinner somewhere. They couldn't have spend a few $1,000s and rent a room for Final Cut Pro people to gather and talk. Come on. It's nonsense. I'm also worried about speed. I'm very fast with turning around project with Final Cut Pro. Absolutely pushing Resolve will slow me way down. Yes, Toby, it will for initially. But that's when you switch from Final Cut Pro 7 to Final Cut Pro 10, didn't you have the same issue? I did. I mean, it's the same thing. Switching from 7 to 10 was, I couldn't just jump everything over to 10. I had to do my big projects in 7 that were in 7. And then what I started doing was doing small projects in 10. Small projects. Started using as much as I could, even with its limitations. That was 10.0. So it's the same switch over from 7 to 10. So it'll be the same thing from going from Final Cut Pro to Resolve. But you don't have to do them all. Just start on some small projects if you're interested. If you're not sure, try the free version. I got the studio version, and I will keep the studio version. I like you'll see why in 1 minute. Toby, I was worried about that too, but I find that I'm just as fast in Resolve now, even with the magnetic time. Without the magnetic time, the cut page helps a lot, and they've updated the cut page. So let's watch this one video that I have from one of the main features in Resolve 10. Here I am editing a video in Resolve 18.5 this morning. Now, let me put this up. Hold on a second. Here we go. Hold on 1 second, please. All right, so here we are in DaVinci Resolve. So let's look at this. This is one of the new features. Transcribe audio. So I can select a clip inside of DaVinci Resolve and transcribe it. This is a big, big feature that Final Cut has got to get this feature. It has to get it. It's going to be, I'm sure it's coming. So you click on it and you select the text. Let me pull this over here. Select the text and just drop the clip in the timeline, whatever text you have selected. Just like that. Incredibly powerful feature. I know you can also drop colored markers in DaVinci Resolve, something I wish that Final Cut had a nice selection like that. And you can also create a subclip from the text, the selected text that you have. You can create a subclip. In Final Cut, that would be a range. You could select the range based on the text. Now, there are limitations. There are limitations. Let's keep watching. Select another portion, append it after the other one, append it right there, and it just drops down after the last clip on the timeline. So now I have 2 clips that I edited. Now watch this, though. That's not all. Now, one of the things you can't do is you can't edit backwards. You can't select, you can copy this, but I can't delete that text so it deletes that portion of video. Can't do that. So that's one of the restrictions that I wish they had, that you could, that it does edit in both directions. So select the text, delete it, it deletes that portion of the clip, at least not the clip itself, but I mean on the timeline. You can do that in Descript. I do it all the time. Let's keep watching. This is what else you can do. You can't cut it, you can only copy. Here's what else you can do. In the project, let me see, where is that going? Create subtitles from audio. So not only can you transcribe the text, you can create subtitles from audio. This is DaVinci Resolve 18.5 Studio Beta. The regular version, Beta, does not have these features. This is Studio only. Create subtitles from audio. So it's creating them. And watch this. Look at this. All the subtitles are there. Now I'm going to change the styling and stuff. I like to have a little background. I'm going to change that. There's the background. Just click that on. There you go. And I'm going to change the position. I like it a little bit lower rather than up there as high as it is. So all of them have been changed, not just the one. And then I'm going to change the position to make it a little bit lower. Something more like that. And now all of them have been changed. All of them have been changed. Now, isn't that a fantastic feature? Isn't that a fantastic feature? Now, it's included if you have, so you get free transcriptions now in DaVinci Resolve. If you have the studio version, you can get the studio beta 18.5. So when I have transcriptions to do, you can also export the text and export whatever. I'm not sure. This is the first version. It is beta, but I want to see the text 2 ways. I want to see if I delete the text, that deletes it, not from the clip in the bin, but from the clip in the timeline or whatever we want to do there. There we go. Resolve is very powerful, but it's also very cumbersome. Millennials will not spend the time or the effort to make it. TikTok vertical videos. I understand. No, I understand that. There's lots of competition out there. The transcription, I think, is done locally. I think it's locally. I have it locally now. He says it's locally. Surprisingly accurate, but it's free. If you pay for the studio version, you don't got to pay additional money for transcription, even with regional accents, dialects. I'm impressed that they have that feature. I'm even impressed that Adobe has that feature, that Premiere has it. Final Cut. Where's Final Cut? I don't know. Are they have to be poked to be woken up? The only thing that's going to help with Final Cut to get it back on track is for a major rewrite of the app with major new features, including text-based editing and text-based captions within the app. You don't have to go to a third party to do that. Like I said, this is the beginning. This is only the beginning, and it is in beta. I'm not going to, not go to Premiere under any circumstances, so you don't have to worry about that. Because I don't like it's not because I don't like Premiere. That's a separate issue. It's because I don't like the Adobe model. The subscription, the ransom model that you have to pay for the rest of your life, or you can't edit on their software. I don't like that. So, what else do we have? You've given a lot of great comments this morning, and I really appreciate it, talking about Resolve. So once again, there's a couple of things. The less Final Cut is updated, and right now it's not been updated. There's no update in the near future for Final Cut that I can see. Toby says he does not like Premiere. I haven't used it for a long time, but I don't like Adobe is what I don't like. But doesn't mean you have to quit Final Cut in order to do Resolve. That's not one of the requirements. You don't launch Resolve and it says you have to throw away your version of Final Cut. You can use both, and I will continue to use both. However, I will continue to learn Resolve. The less Final Cut Pro is updated, the more I'm going to spend time in Resolve. Just that caption feature is fantastic. It's really, really cool. I mean, it's exciting. Resolve is exciting. I have to say that. Is it cumbersome? I would say it's complex. If Resolve gets some kind of magnetic timeline as an option, don't force it on people. As an option, that will be interesting. And I think Resolve might be doing that. They probably had a lot of requests for making a magnetic timeline. You might need to change the title of the show to Resolve TV and Coffee. No, I'm not going to do that because it's not Final Cut Pro and Coffee anymore. It's Final Cut TV. Final Cut TV. But I also could change it to RTV, Richard Taylor TV and Coffee. But I'm going to stick with Final Cut. I'm not giving up on Final Cut. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm going to give it some more time, but the more they disappoint, okay, Final Cut's here, the more it disappoints, the more my expectations go down with Final Cut, the more time I'm going to spend on DaVinci Resolve. Okay? DaVinci Resolve is up here. Final Cut is down here. I'm not giving up on it. I've got too many years. And at this point, I still have faith that the Final Cut Pro team can do a Hail Mary pass and get us a great feature update to Final Cut Pro and put it back in the running. Eric says, Final Cut Pro 3 was the hook that pulled me into the Apple world, spent many thousands of dollars with Apple since. I have too. I just sold, let me show you this. I just sold this. Let me go over the graphics. I just sold this. Let me see if here we go. I sold my Mac Pro. I sold it for almost half price. I sold it for almost half price, which I was lucky to get that much. It cost me a little about $9,000, something like that, when I bought it. I had a couple of discounts that I applied, and there was 1,000 views of that ad when I had it on Facebook Marketplace. I only sold it local, I only sold it local, would sell it local, and it had to be cash. I don't deal with scams and Zelle and all that kind of stuff when it's that much money. They had to come and pick it up, and they had to bring cash, and they got it. I had over 1,000 views for that machine. A dozen people offered me $3,500 for it. I wanted a little bit more, and I got a little bit more. I got just under $4,000, so a little bit less than half price. But I'm really glad. I'm really glad that I sold it. I now have the money for the next MacBook Pro that I buy. I'm going to stick with MacBook Pros at this point. This MacBook Pro, I have the M1 Max, has been as solid as it can be. It's been running Final Cut Pro. It does these live streams. I'm streaming to Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter all at the same time with this MacBook Pro, Ecamm Live. It's been a great, great workhorse. I almost bought the M2 MacBook Pro, but I decided I'm going to wait. And this time I'm not going to give my MacBook Pro to Apple. I'm going to sell it locally as well. But I'm going to wait for the M3 MacBook Pro update because this one is doing such a great, great job. And I really, really like it. I have 3 monitors up here. I got an LG monitor and another side monitor and then the MacBook Pro monitor itself. But anyway, I sold my 2019 Mac Pro. I'm so glad. I'm so glad that I got what I got for it because I don't know if the market's going to be, maybe it'll be worth some to some people. This person wanted it. He wanted to run an older version of the Mac OS, which you can do. Apple were selling the trash can Mac Pro for $6,800, but they would not even give $50 for a trade-in. Yeah, I know. I had the same issue with, I was going to trade my MacBook, my 2021 MacBook Pro, on the same version, the M2 version. This thing cost $4,000. They were going to give me $1,500. 1 year. 1 year. It dropped $3,000 or $2,500 in value according to Apple. I wasn't going to do that, so. If you watch MKBHD, Marcus Brownlee is turning his 2019 Mac Pro into an aquarium. I got almost $4,000 for mine. I think that's listen, I still can't believe it's not sitting in my closet. I have a closet. Since I got the MacBook Pro, it's been sitting in a closet. And it ran fantastic. Now, don't get me wrong. I ran it for 2 years. I ran it from 2019 to 2021, and it did a great, great job. But once the M2 started coming out, you can see the writing on the wall. And Apple their software is silicon-based, and everything's silicon-based, and the OS is going to be silicon-based. So I said, well, I'm going to switch over to silicon at this point. And I do have an old trash can. I have an old, not trash can, cheese grater Mac Pro downstairs in my recording studio. I do have that. So I'm not going to turn it into an aquarium because I got $4,000 for it. $4,000. There's no, Richard, they were only giving you $1,200. Maybe that's what it was. They weren't going to get it for that. I would keep it for that. There's no way. But my point is this. When the M3 MacBook Pro comes out, I will sell this version locally the same way I sold the MacBook Pro. There are people saying, that I'll never get that kind of money for it. You know, there's people offering me $800 and $1,000 on Facebook Marketplace, and I just LOL'd them and said, don't bother me with such nonsense. And I got almost $4,000. So I was right. They were wrong. I thought I could get close to $4,000, and I did. Saw your sponsors quickly when you showed off your Mac Pro. I'm considering the Audio Design Desk plugin, which seems to be very powerful, but I'm having trouble finding user reviews. What do you think of their plugins? Listen, highly, highly recommend Audio Design Desks. First off, you can buy a perpetual license. If you're not sure, which is what I have, if you're not sure, try it out first. I think there's a trial. And there's also, you can just, do a subscription for a month or 2 months, I think, and try it out. But it's not only is it powerful working with Final Cut, it has tons and tons of royalty-free Foley effects, sound effects, music beds. And whenever I use their stuff, I never get any strikes in YouTube. They're really particular about that. It's worth just that alone. They put I think they had 72, 75,000 different audio files at this point, and they give a new one like every Friday. And they have music beds as well as Foley effects, constantly updating. Just for that alone, it's really worth it. You can just search for a mood and bring up a music bed, and you can use it in your Final Cut project and stuff. So highly worth it. I think they have a trial. Try the trial. If you're still not sure, just do a subscription for a couple months or a year. And then if you like it, turn it into a perpetual license, which means you don't have to pay the subscription fee. Highly recommend Audio Design Desk. One thing you'll find out about me is I'm not going to rave about something that I don't believe myself. So I'm going to be honest with everybody. That's the way I am. I mean, that's why else would I even be on here? So my opinion of Final Cut is I'm not leaving Final Cut, not at all, but my expectations are way down here. If they continue this slow pace, it's been a glacial pace of development of the last 3 or 4 years, it'll stay here. But I'm really excited about DaVinci Resolve at this point. I really am. I think it's and LumaFusion as well. LumaFusion is doing some fantastic versions, updates. And the other thing about LumaFusion is you can run it on your Mac. Even though it's an iPad app, iOS app, you can run it on your Mac. They have a version. If you buy the version in the iOS store, you can run LumaFusion on your Mac. Now, it's not developed for the Mac yet. I think they have one person working on the Mac version to make sure it's, okay. But it's not. It's really based on touch. Really like LumaFusion a lot. If they ever port it over to the Mac 100%, or even as it develops, if it works with the Mac, that'll be fantastic. This is a good point. I use Blackmagic Camera, so it's pretty challenging to stay in a Final Cut Pro. I've been using B-Raw Toolbox and Gyroflow Toolbox. And it's more frustrating than it needs to be. I own Resolve, but never taken the dive. I'm sure my time is coming unless Apple pulls something out of their empty head. So listen, let's hope that they have, listen, the only thing that makes sense to me is they're doing a major rewrite. Just adding a few features does not make sense to me. They can do that with anything. We've had 2 features in the last 18 months. That's ridiculous. And what are they doing for 18 months? Developing 2 features in 18 months? Come on, they got to be working on something bigger than that. They've got to be working on something bigger than that. It's got to be, I'm saying it's a brand new version written from the ground up, starting all over, but they have to, don't start what you did before and you can't go from 7 to 10. If it's like just say it's version 11, make sure you can take your projects from 10 to 11 seamlessly. Not this nonsense, you got to get a translator or whatever. That'd be complete BS. That would be Final Cut Pro 10 launch all over again. And I'm not going to defend that stuff. So should we be calling this FCPX Resolve TV? I've dropped the Pro. It's no longer Final Cut Pro TV. It's just Final Cut TV. So it's not Final Cut Pro specific, although, as you might guess, it's going to be Final Cut Pro centric, but I'm going to be talking about other things as well. Audio Design Desk is amazing, but there's no reason why Apple couldn't include a similar app, if not more innovative and bundled with Final Cut Pro. Do they have the developers that are going to develop all this music? And do they have the developers that are going to do all these Foley effects? They can't even keep Final Cut Pro updated. How are they going to do another app? They can't even keep Final Cut Pro updated at this point. Logic hasn't seen an update in a while. Motion, forget Motion. Motion is like the redheaded stepchild of the Pro apps. Motion is like years behind the development of even Final Cut Pro. I'm not saying it's not good. I'm saying they don't spend resources on it. Add another more complex app in there, I don't see it happening. They can't even keep Final Cut Pro updated. I will say again that I hope Apple will release an Final Cut Pro for iPad. Let's go, Apple, catch up. I think they eventually will, but I don't think it'll be Final Cut Pro. It'll be Final Cut for iPad or something like that. It won't be Final Cut Pro for the iPad. I doubt it. If Final Cut for iPad, Final Cut Lite, something, it'll be a version of Final Cut Pro, perhaps. Maybe not. Maybe they'll just update iMovie and call it the new Final Cut Pro for the iPad. I've already had my 2 cups of coffee this morning, so I'm not going to have any more during the show. Any more questions or comments about Resolve and Final Cut? I do have something coming up for me tonight. Let's check on the cat room. No cats in the cat room. Huh. They must all be on the other side of, at least I don't see them. Let's go over here for a second. This is my Mac Pro. So this is tonight. This is the first time I have a movie coming that I'm showing in Silver Spring, Maryland tonight at the AFI Theater. Let's see if this is going to be it. Yeah, that's what I thought. Here we go. At the AFI Theater. Now, this is the first time that I've ever been featured on Apple News, at least, local Washington, D.C. If you notice up here, it's with the arrows pointing, it says, Raz the documentary, DC-based band from explosive to fizzle. So they featured this on Apple News, my local, at least my version locally. It says Saturday filmmakers Jeff Krulik and Richard Taylor will screen an extended director's cut of Raz the documentary at the Silver Theater and Cultural Center in Silver Spring, Maryland. That's the first time I've had this kind of a movie on the big screen, so I'm pretty excited. Jeff Krulik and I have been editing it for months and months, years, because of the COVID situation. It got a huge delay. But it was edited in Final Cut Pro, 100%. If I was doing it now, I don't know. I might go back and forth between Resolve and Final Cut at this point. I have complete faith that the Final Cut Pro team is working on something, because there's been no evidence they've been working at all. 2 updates in 18 months is a ridiculous pace of development, so they've got to be working on something. Let's hope it's a brand new, built from the ground up. Let's raise my expectations of Final Cut Pro back up where they belong. Make the Final Cut Pro Creative Summit in November of next year. If it happens, something exciting again. We get to talk to the team. There's a human in the cat room. Was there a human in there? Let me see. Let's go back and look. Where's a human? You mean there must have been a human? I don't see one. Just like FCPUG changed to LACPUG. Yeah. Well, I've always been, I've been Final Cut Pro-centric. Ronald says, this is my first coffee. Love the concept and the community and the way you answer each question. I'm glad to have you here, Ronald. I'm glad you could make it. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Yeah, we're going to do these every Saturday, maybe every Saturday. I might not do 52 a year, but I should be doing 40 some. I might take off a few. Listen, has there been any Final Cut Pro news in the last 3 months since I started these? No. There's been no news about Final Cut Pro. But I'm trying to make news, trying to keep up to date with stuff. And we'll be discussing Final Cut Pro a lot, but the more I evolve into using Resolve and LumaFusion, we'll talk about them as well. But it's no longer Final Cut Pro TV. It's just Final Cut TV, which is just more of a generic term. It's not going to be Resolve TV. Listen, there's so many good Resolve people out there. I'm not going to throw my hat in the ring to do that, but I'll show you. Here's what I'll show you. I'll show you Resolve from a Final Cut Pro editor's point of view. That's the kind of things that I'll be showing. So like I showed you this morning, there's something I couldn't do. It was so funny that I did that tutorial, little thing on Resolve. And when I went to export it, I had to take it into Final Cut because I knew Final Cut so much better. And there's things that I wanted to do. I don't know where to do them in Resolve yet, but I'll learn them. I'll learn them. And I'm not going to switch, but I will be using Resolve. The less Final Cut's updated, I'll be using Resolve and LumaFusion. Both Resolve and LumaFusion are really, really cool NLEs. And hopefully I can say that about Final Cut Pro in the next couple of months. That'd be great. So I have to get ready. I have to drive down to Silver Spring. What's it, 12:15? I got a few more minutes yet. So here's what I'm doing. I was born in Washington, D.C. I grew up as a child in Silver Spring, it was actually halfway between Wheaton, Maryland, and Silver Spring downtown. This place called Montgomery Hills, where Sylvester Stallone was from there. Goldie Hawn went to Blair High School up there. And it's right where George Avenue and the Beltway cross over. I grew up in that area. So on the way down to the screening tonight in Silver Spring, I used to go to the Silver Theater as a kid. I haven't been back there but once or twice to see a David Lynch movie, but I know exactly where it is. We used to go there as a kid. I'm going back to the Silver Theater to see my film on the big screen tonight, but I'm going to stop on my way to Silver Spring this afternoon. I'm going to stop at my old elementary school, and I'm going to take pictures, videotape that little visit, and I'm going to stop at my old house in Montgomery Hills. It's on Riley Road in Montgomery Hills, just a couple of streets off of George Avenue in the Beltway. As a matter of fact, they tore out, I used to play in the woods right down the street from me, and I remember when the bulldozers came in and started taking the trees down to put in the Beltway. I was just a little kid then, but I remember that because they took our woods away. But anyway, I'm going to stop at the elementary school I used to go to, and I'm going to stop at my house on Riley Road and just do a little quick film since I'm down in the area, maybe do a little talking about it. A lot of people have left Apple in the last 2 years. You have to believe it's not only the top executives, maybe the Final Cut Pro team has had defections. Don't know. I know some people on the Final Cut Pro team on the inside. We don't discuss stuff like that, but I have had some comments made to me from people that were on that we're not going to discuss on this live stream. But let's see what happens. The Final Cut Pro team will have to sink or swim on its own. They'll have to sink or swim on its own. I still have faith. in them. And I'm still going to continue to use Final Cut. I mean, I've got all these years. I know it inside and out. I'm an Apple certified Final Cut Pro trainer. I teach Apple classes. But we'll have to see what happens. If they snooze for the next 6 months, it's not going to be good. I'm going to be more disappointed. But it ain't the first time they've disappointed people. But let's see what happens. Let's see if they raise our expectations up. And in my case anyway. All right, everyone, I'm going to go down. If you're in Silver Spring area, you come on down to the Silver tonight, 5:30 screening of my documentary. It's specifically a local documentary. It's about a local band, an incredible local band that made it big locally, but never got out of the local area. They should have, but they never did. And they're friends of mine. Their music is fantastic. It's original rock and roll. And Jeff Krulik and I started on it, like I said, 5 years ago in Final Cut. We finally finished it. It's going to be screened tonight. One of my first. I've had 2 films on the big screen. This one, and then the one I worked on with Bradley, Off the Tracks. That was also on the big screen, different places. So Those are my 2 film credits on the big screen. I have lots of YouTube videos. So I'm going to get out of here, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Final Cut TV and Coffee. We'll be back next Saturday. And if there's any breaking news about Final Cut, don't give us a bug fix, Final Cut Pro team. You've given us 3 bug fixes in a row, which is more than any time in the history of Final Cut Pro development. We got 10.6.2 a year ago in April. And then since then, you've given us 10.6.3, 10.6.4, and 10.6.5. They've all been bug fixes, 3 bug fixes in a row. You've only given us 2 features in 18 months. Since 10.6 came out 18 months ago, you've only given us 2 additional features. So please give us something. Whatever you're working on, give us a beta, like DaVinci Resolve does. Give us a beta to work on. It's not the Final Cut Pro team's decision. It's Apple corporate. All right, everyone. I'm going to get out of here. I will talk to everyone next Saturday at 11, or if there's any breaking news, I'll be on here. Oh, yeah, let's do that. So here you go. Subscribe over there, YouTube, Richard Taylor TV. Don't forget, subscribe, like and subscribe. I appreciate all the likes and subscriptions over there. And go over to Richard Taylor TV and subscribe. You'll be notified whenever we go live. If there's any live breaking Final Cut Pro news, this is the place you're going to hear it first. All right? Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I'll talk to you next time.